Doing this again. Um, so Jean went to the school to the blah, blah, blah. This is Luna, by the way. um, Jean went to the store to get the stuff for me to make my spaghetti sauce. This is something I learned how to make from my grandmother, although there are different ways to do it. I use a lot of canned tomatoes and a lot of variants of those, especially since our blender went kaput. Um, and I use fresh tomatoes to sort of freshen up the flavor once I've used the technique to nix the flavor of the canning process as much as you can. Really, the fresh tomatoes just sort of drive that home. Um, After we'd moved it out to Arizona, my grandmother would use jars of pre-made spaghetti sauce and just season it and add the ingredients that she wanted. But this is not Pennsylvania where she used to make it with just, bushels of tomatoes. It's really expensive here and you cannot get enough for like a decent batch. And Jean and Chris will eat my tomato sauce like till the cows come home, and they will eat a lot of sauce. My sauce is very chunky. It is not just, I'm not even sure why you would even really call it sauce. I mean, it is. It is what you would want a traditional sauce to be of this kind, even though they don't really call it spaghetti sauce in Italy and stuff. I don't even remember what it's called. But it's a family recipe. So, there's this lady that stopped him and called him greedy because he took the last 6 cans of straight tomato sauce at the store, and instead of asking, because I would have been totally fine, because he'd already substituted the cans that they didn't have with puree, I would have been totally fine with, giving someone a can and just substituting. I can work like that. All I need is the tomato product, and for it to be broken down enough since we don't have a blender anymore. So, anyway, she just doesn't ask. She doesn't say anything. She says, "Hey, it looks like you have a lot of cans there. Yes, you guys are making something with a lot of tomatoes." "Yeah. Is there any chance that you can spare one, please? Because I just need 1 can." And, if she'd been polite and asked, he would have. I was like, she didn't even ask? Because, the shelves were pretty bare. Whenever he went to the store, I mean, there was only 6 cans on that shelf. And I actually needed 12. So he'd already, called and saw what he could supplement with, because he was like, there's only 6 cans. Because in order for this to last and for me to have enough to freeze afterwards, I have to make a really, really big batch. So, and I do put some meat in my sauce. It's not going to be heavy on the meat. There have been batches that I've made that have been heavy on the meat. However, they are usually just made in the big round big pan. It is still a big pan. It is still bigger than the one that my grandmother used. However, my grandmother made a thinner sauce. Mine is thick. And it is actually more nutritional that way, which is why I do it that way. I did a little bit of research before I did that, and I also had to rack my brain, because at some point in my childhood, my grandmother had actually made that sauce that way. The way that it's really supposed to be made from scratch. And it wasn't the same as with the jars. The jars make a thinner sauce in general, which does mean that yes, it does stretch further, but it's not quite as... it doesn't sit on your stomach the same way. And I have 2 people that I have to feed that have high metabolisms, and the more it's already chemically broken down, the more the more quickly it will move through them, and they will be hungry sooner. So, it's kind of important to take into account who you're cooking for. So I do my base with a compromise between fresh and not so fresh. It's not particularly ideal, especially for something like this. But living in Arizona, you don't really have access to that many tomatoes. Beyond that, they're really expensive. So we got enough to, after I used the trick my grandmother taught me, to neutralize the flavor as far as you can really do. Where I'm going to freshen it with fresh tomatoes, because fresh tomatoes are awesome. And once you do that, it's basically, it tastes like sauce that was made fresh. I'm sure that if you really pay attention, that there's probably something that you can pick out. Because I'm one of those people that was a game that we played at the table, especially me and my grandfather. Whenever he got into cooking more, we'd sit there and we'd try to guess what was in things based on, what's there. And I'm not gonna lie, you do nix the canning and the jarring, preservative type flavor. But I mean, I don't know, I can't help but feel like fresh tomatoes taste different. That might be a psychological thing. But at the same time, I don't know. I like it better made fresh, but at the same time, it also takes a lot of cooking to get in all those different flavors. So I was surprised, especially with the state of the shelves at that store, that he actually managed to find fresh thyme. A little disappointed that there wasn't any fresh rosemary, in that we have to use dried, but I work with what I've got, and that's pretty much how I learned to do things. You have to adapt to the area that you live in. Sometimes it's not possible to get bushels and bushels of fresh tomatoes. Sometimes it's not possible to get a bunch of fresh rosemary. Some stores actually hesitate to carry it because rosemary draws pests. And rosemary draws in spiders and all sorts of stuff. If they are there, they will find the rosemary. It's actually one of the reasons why rosemary is not advisable to grow right on the wall of your residence. I mean, I guess if you are adequately sure, absolutely sure that getting them right up to the edge right there will not somehow manage with them inside, sure. But I would never put them there. I was an ag, and I know things. So, certain plants, because they draw a bunch of insects and different things to them, they just have that natural draw. You want to put them at least a couple feet out or so. Otherwise, yeah. Which reminds me, I really need to speak to the landlord. It looks like we found a fault in the foundation between our place and the place next door. So at least it's not in the middle, but yeah. And we found it inside though. You can actually see the gap because it affected this one area where my desk is, the firewall. And you can see something you shouldn't be able to see. And the grout actually broke apart there, so that you can barely see through there if you have a flashlight shining it just right, and it's not something you want to see. I feel bad because this is the latest owner for the place. We've had probably a dozen different owners, and each one didn't want to fix accumulative problems, just with age. The sort of things that, after you fix them, it's okay. Like, you shouldn't have to touch it for like 10, 20 years, but nobody wants to touch it. So, it just takes a lot more maintenance on our part for now, but eventually it's going to cause deeper problems because nobody wants to touch it. So eventually, whenever we move out, we're going to make sure and we're going to ask questions like, what kind of pipes does this place have? And if they don't know, they should ask someone who does. Oh. Nap time's over, Chris! Oh, look, I looked red there for a second. You are actually asleep. The world has ended. It's time to get up. You can sleep a little longer if you want. But it's time to get up. You can go back to sleep for a little bit, but you can't sleep much longer. Otherwise you won't sleep tonight. You know that's important, right? Shouldn't have fought your nap or you'd have more time. I'll leave him alone for a little bit.
$9.
Huh?
$9.
That's not too bad for
Same
regular
price
cab.
as Uber. Lyft.
Same price?
This time around, because we had no traffic and we hit all the lights. So we had no traffic delay.
Well, that's good.
So this time it was the same price. Most of the time it's
Most of the time it's like
not.
No, most of the time it's like twice the price.
Yes. So this was actually cheap.
Good.
This time around. Instead of taking down Bethany, he asked which way you want to go. It's up and around this way. So you don't have to hit the freeway traffic.
Right. Anyway, I have some sauce to make. So this is Luna saying goodbye.